My name is Wilder Sornel, and I've always believed that security systems reveal more about people than they protect. Tonight, that philosophy was about to change my life forever. I was hunched over my kitchen table at 11:47 p.m., surrounded by circuit boards and tangled wires, trying to debug a glitch in my home's smart security hub. The irony wasn't lost on me. A security engineer whose own house was having technical difficulties. My wife Mira had been complaining about false alarms for weeks, and I'd finally carved out time to fix the problem. The doorbell chimed through my speakers, followed by the soft knock of someone who didn't want to wake the neighbors. I glanced at the security monitor and saw a woman I didn't recognize. Tall, elegant, wearing a red coat that seemed too expensive for our modest neighborhood in Altair City. "Can I help you?" I asked through the intercom. "Your wife is in bed with my husband right now," she said, her voice steady and controlled. "And there are cameras." I stared at the monitor for a long moment, processing her words. Then I smiled, not because I was happy, but because everything suddenly made perfect sense. The late nights, the yoga classes, the way Mira had been treating me like furniture for the past 6 months. "Well," I said, pressing the door release, "let's not interrupt them. Come in. We should probably discuss what to do with that footage." The woman stepped inside, shaking raindrops from her coat. Up close, she was stunning, the kind of beautiful that made you understand why men made terrible decisions. Her dark hair was pulled back in a way that suggested she'd dressed hastily, and her green eyes held a mixture of anger and calculation that I recognized from my own mirror. "I'm Elara, she said, extending a manicured hand. "I live in the penthouse complex about 6 blocks from here. My husband is Jace Arnell." I knew Jace. He was one of Mira's colleagues at the law firm, the type of guy who wore $1,000 suits and talked about his BMW like it was a family member. He'd been to our house for dinner parties, always making subtle comments about my quaint profession while eyeing Mira like she was dessert. "Wilder Sornel," I replied, gesturing toward the living room. "Can I get you something to drink? This seems like a conversation that requires alcohol. Bourbon, if you have it." I poured 2 glasses of my good whiskey, the bottle I'd been saving for a special occasion. Apparently, discovering your wife's affair qualified. "So," I said, settling into my chair across from her, "tell me about these cameras." Elara pulled out a tablet and placed it on the coffee table between us. The screen showed a grid of 4 video feeds, all time-stamped from earlier that evening. My stomach tightened as I recognized my own bedroom in the top left corner. "I had them installed 3 weeks ago," she said, her voice matter-of-fact. "Professional grade, motion-activated, nearly invisible. Your wife has been quite enthusiastic in her commentary about your marriage." She tapped the screen, and audio began playing. Mira's voice, breathless and excited. "Wilder's working late again. He's so predictable, so boring. Sometimes I think he cares more about his stupid gadgets than me." Then Jace's voice, smug and satisfied. "Well, you won't have to worry about that much longer. Once the merger goes through and you're promoted, you can afford to upgrade everything, including husbands." I took a long sip of bourbon, letting the burn distract me from the twist in my gut. "Merger?" "Jace's investment firm is acquiring a controlling interest in your wife's law practice," Elara explained. "It's been in the works for months, highly confidential and highly inappropriate given their relationship. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories." I watched the footage for another minute, my analytical mind cataloging details while my emotions went numb. This wasn't just an affair. It was a complete betrayal of everything I'd built with Mira over 8 years of marriage. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. Elara's smile was sharp as broken glass. "Because I believe in mutually beneficial arrangements. You want revenge, and I want justice. Together, we can give them both." "What kind of justice?" The kind that ruins careers, destroys reputations, and leaves them with nothing but each other. And even that won't last long once the money's gone. I studied her face, recognizing a kindred spirit. Elara wasn't just angry, she was strategic. The cameras, the timing, even showing up at my door tonight. This wasn't emotional, it was calculated. "You've been planning this for a while," I said. 3 months, ever since I found the first hotel receipt in Jace's jacket. She leaned forward, her eyes intense. "But I needed an ally, someone with your particular skills and access." "My skills?" "You design security systems for half the businesses in Altair City. You understand surveillance, digital forensics, and most importantly, you know how to make things disappear without leaving fingerprints." She was right. My company, Sentinel Systems, had contracts with banks, law firms, and tech companies throughout the city. I had access to information networks that most people couldn't even imagine. "What exactly are you proposing?" I asked. Elara pulled up another screen on her tablet, a detailed dossier on Jace's financial dealings. "Your wife and my husband think they're clever, but they've left digital footprints everywhere. Conflicts of interest, insider trading, misappropriation of client funds, all perfectly legal to discover if you know where to look." "And you know where to look?" "I have a friend who specializes in digital forensics. Very discreet, very thorough. He's been waiting for my go-ahead to dig deeper." I finished my bourbon and set the glass down carefully. Outside, I could hear the distant hum of traffic and the occasional siren, the soundtrack of a city that never slept. Inside, everything had changed. "There's something else," Elara said, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "They're not just planning to leave us. They're planning to take everything. Jace has been moving assets offshore, and your wife has been documenting your erratic behavior for months. They're building a case to paint us as unstable, vindictive spouses who can't be trusted with custody or assets." That hit me like a physical blow. Our daughter Emma was away at college, but the thought of Mira poisoning her against me made my hands clench into fists. "Show me everything," I said. For the next hour, Elara walked me through a web of deception that was breathtaking in its scope. Financial records, email chains, even social media posts that had been carefully crafted to support their narrative. They hadn't just betrayed us. They'd been systematically destroying our lives while we watched. "So, what's the plan?" I asked finally. "We give them exactly what they're giving us," Elara said, standing and smoothing her coat. "Complete and total humiliation, but we do it smart, clean, and legal. No violence, no illegal activities, just the truth, delivered in the most devastating way possible." She handed me a business card with only a phone number. "Call me tomorrow. We have a lot of work to do." After she left, I sat in my living room for a long time, staring at the security footage that was still playing on her tablet. She'd left it behind deliberately, a test to see if I'd try to delete the evidence or use it for my own purposes. Instead, I did what I did best. I started planning. By 3 a.m., I had a rough outline of how to bring down the 2 people who'd thought they were smart enough to destroy me. The security engineer in me appreciated the elegance of using their own tools against them. The husband in me wanted to watch them burn. But first, I needed to call an old friend. Orion Vanton's digital forensics workshop looked like a mad scientist's laboratory crossed with a teenager's gaming setup. Monitors covered every wall, cables snaked across the floor like electronic vines, and the air hummed with the constant whir of cooling fans. Empty energy drink cans formed small pyramids on every available surface. "Wilder!" Orion called out as I entered, not turning away from his screens. Perfect timing. I was just cracking the encryption on a corporate embezzlement case. Want to see how easy it is to hide money when you think you're clever? Orion and I had been friends since college, where he'd taught me that every digital system was just another puzzle waiting to be solved. While I'd gone into security design, He'd specialized in digital investigation, helping lawyers, insurance companies, and occasionally private individuals uncover electronic evidence. "Actually," I said, "I need your help with something personal." That got his attention. Orion spun around in his chair, his wild red hair sticking up in all directions. He was wearing a t-shirt that read, "I don't have trust issues, I have evidence," which seemed particularly appropriate. Personal how? Like, help me install a new router personal, or help me destroy my enemies personal? The second one. His eyes lit up with interest. "Oh, this is going to be good. Tell me everything." I spent the next 20 minutes explaining the situation, showing him the footage Elara had captured, and outlining what we knew about Mira and Jace's plans. Orion listened without interruption, occasionally making notes on a tablet. "Wow," he said finally. "Your wife really doesn't think much of you, does she? I mean, the technical incompetence comments alone are worth a lawsuit. Can you help? Brother, this is what I live for." He cracked his knuckles theatrically. "But I need to ask, how far are we willing to go? Because I can make these people disappear from the internet entirely, or I can just embarrass them professionally. Your choice. I want them exposed, not erased. Everything legal, everything documented, everything permanent. Good man. Revenge is a dish best served with proper documentation." He pulled up a new screen and started typing. "Let's start with your boy Jace. Investment guys always leave the best digital trails." Within minutes, Orion had pulled up Jace's social media profiles, professional networking accounts, and even his online banking information. I didn't ask how he'd gotten access to the banking records. Some things were better left unknown. "Interesting," Orion murmured, scrolling through financial transactions. "Your buddy Jace has been very busy. Look at this pattern of transfers over the past 6 months." The screen showed a series of wire transfers, each for amounts just under the federal reporting threshold. Money was flowing from Jace's business accounts to offshore holdings, then back into domestic accounts under different names. "That's not necessarily illegal," I pointed out. "No, but it's suspicious as hell. And look at the timing. Every transfer corresponds to a major client deal at your wife's law firm. He's been getting inside information and trading on it. Can you prove that? Give me 48 hours, and I'll have a timeline that would make the Securities and Exchange Commission weep with joy." Orion's fingers flew across the keyboard. "But that's just the appetizer. Want to see the main course?" He pulled up another screen showing email headers and metadata. "Your wife has been very careful about deleting her communications with Jace, but she forgot about automatic cloud backups. Every law firm has them for compliance reasons. You can access those? I can access anything if I know where to look. And your wife's firm uses the same cloud security system that you helped design 2 years ago? Remember the backdoor access you built in for emergency recovery?" I did remember. It was a standard feature in corporate security systems, a way for administrators to recover data if primary access was compromised. I'd never imagined using it to spy on my own wife. "Show me." The emails were damning. Months of correspondence between Mira and Jace, planning not just their affair, but their complete financial strategy. They'd been coordinating legal advice with investment decisions, sharing confidential client information, and discussing how to minimize their exposure when they left their respective spouses. One email from Mira particularly caught my attention. "Wilder's been acting suspicious lately. He asked about the joint account yesterday. We need to accelerate the timeline. Can you have the offshore transfers completed by the end of the month?" Jace's response: "Already in progress. Once the merger is finalized, we'll have enough liquid assets to disappear completely. Your husband will never see it coming." "Arrogant idiots," Orion said, reading over my shoulder. "They're discussing federal crimes in writing. It's like they wanted to get caught." "What about Elara? Can you verify her story?" Orion's expression grew more serious. "That's where things get interesting. Elara Trenix is not who she appears to be." He pulled up a background check that made my stomach drop. "Real name: Elara Voss, former corporate intelligence specialist, worked for several major firms investigating white-collar crime. She's not just Jace's betrayed wife. She's a professional investigator. She lied to me? More like she didn't tell you the whole truth. According to this, she's been building a case against Jace for over a year. The affair with your wife was just the final piece of evidence she needed. I sat back in my chair, processing this information. Elara hadn't stumbled onto the affair. She'd been systematically documenting Jace's criminal activities and had probably orchestrated the discovery of his relationship with Mira. So what does that mean for us? It means we're not just getting revenge, Orion said with a grin. We're helping to take down a legitimate criminal conspiracy. This isn't personal anymore. It's justice. My phone buzzed with a text message from Mira. Working late again tonight. Don't wait up. I showed the message to Orion, who laughed. Perfect. That gives us time to set up some surveillance of our own. How do you feel about turning your house into a recording studio? What do you have in mind? Your wife thinks she's been careful, but she's gotten sloppy. She's been bringing Jace to your house because she thinks it's safer than his place. Less chance of Elara catching them. But she doesn't know that you've been upgrading your home security system. He was right. I'd been slowly installing new cameras and audio equipment throughout the house, partly for security and partly because I enjoyed testing new technology. Mira had stopped paying attention to my projects months ago. We turn your entire house into a recording device, Orion continued. Every room, every conversation, every incriminating statement. Then we sit back and let them hang themselves. Is that legal? It's your house, your equipment, and your wife. As long as we don't distribute anything inappropriate, it's perfectly legal to record conversations in your own home. I thought about it for a moment. The idea of secretly recording Mira felt like a violation, but then I remembered her voice on Elara's footage, casually discussing how to destroy my life. Do it, I said. We spent the next 4 hours installing micro cameras and audio pickups throughout my house. Orion's equipment was military grade, virtually invisible and capable of recording high-definition video and crystal-clear audio. By the time we finished, every room except the bathrooms was under complete surveillance. One more thing, Orion said as we wrapped up. I think we should bring Elara in on this. If she really is a professional investigator, she might have resources we need. I don't trust her. You don't have to trust her. But you can use her just like she's using you. The enemy of my enemy and all that. He had a point. If Elara was building a legal case against Jace, our evidence could strengthen her position. And if she had professional resources, they could help ensure that our revenge was both devastating and completely legal. Set up a meeting, I said. But we control the location and the agenda. Already on it. Orion pulled up a secure messaging app. I've been in contact with her since yesterday. She's been waiting for you to make the next move. Yesterday? How did you... Wilder, my friend, you're not the only one who's been planning this. Some of us just started earlier. As I drove home, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being manipulated by forces I didn't fully understand. But for the first time in months, I felt like I had some control over my situation. Mira and Jace thought they were playing chess while I played checkers. They were about to discover that I'd been playing a completely different game. The meeting with Elara took place at Fletch's Bar, a dive establishment on the industrial side of Altair City, where the lighting was dim and the clientele minded their own business. I arrived early and chose a corner booth that gave me a clear view of both entrances, old habits from my security training. Elara appeared exactly on time, now dressed in casual clothes that somehow made her look more dangerous than the elegant coat from our first meeting. She slid into the booth across from me and signaled the bartender for a drink. So, she said without preamble, Orion tells me you've been busy. Orion talks too much. Orion is very good at his job, which is why I hired him 6 months ago. I stared at her. You hired him? I needed someone with digital forensics expertise who could also get close to you when the time was right. Orion's reputation for helping betrayed spouses made him perfect. The pieces clicked into place. Orion's sudden interest in my personal life, his availability when I needed help, even his workshop location, everything had been orchestrated. How long have you been planning this? Since I discovered Jace's first affair 18 months ago. Your wife wasn't his first victim, Wilder. She was just the most useful one. Elara pulled out her tablet and showed me a series of photographs, Jace with different women over the past 2 years, hotel receipts, restaurant bills, even vacation photos. He'd been systematically cheating on her while building his criminal enterprise. Why not just divorce him and take half his assets? Because half of nothing is still nothing. Jace has been hiding money for years, and most of his apparent wealth is actually borrowed against future earnings. If I'd divorced him normally, I would have gotten a pile of debt and he would have disappeared with the real money. She swiped to another screen showing financial projections. But if he's convicted of securities fraud and conspiracy, all of his hidden assets become subject to federal seizure. As his betrayed wife who cooperated with the investigation, I get to keep our legitimate holdings and walk away clean. And what do I get out of this? You get to watch your wife lose everything she thinks she's gaining. Her job, her reputation, her freedom, and eventually Jace himself, because men like him don't stay loyal when the money runs out. The bartender brought our drinks, and we sat in silence for a moment. I was beginning to understand that Elara wasn't just seeking revenge. She was executing a complex plan that would destroy multiple lives while keeping her own hands clean. There's something else, she continued. Something Orion discovered in his research that you need to know. She pulled up another document, a private investigator's report dated 3 weeks ago. Your wife hired someone to document your daily routine, your financial habits, and your psychological state. She's been building a case to have you declared mentally unstable. The report was thorough and damning. Photos of me working late in my workshop, speculation about my obsessive behavior with security systems, even interviews with neighbors about my paranoid installation of cameras around the house. She's planning to have you committed. She's planning to have you declared incompetent to handle your own affairs. It would give her power of attorney over all your assets, including your business. She could liquidate everything and disappear before you ever got out of psychiatric evaluation. I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. This wasn't just betrayal. It was attempted destruction of my entire existence. Show me the rest. The next hour was a masterclass in how to systematically destroy someone's life. Mira had been documenting every aspect of my behavior, looking for patterns that could be presented as evidence of mental instability. My late-night work sessions became insomnia and obsessive behavior. My security upgrades became paranoid delusions. Even my friendship with Orion was characterized as association with criminal elements. The good news, Elara said, is that she's been so focused on building a case against you that she's ignored the case we're building against her. What case? Conspiracy to commit fraud, ethics violations, misappropriation of client funds, and accessory to securities fraud. Your wife isn't just cheating on you. She's been helping Jace commit federal crimes. She showed me bank records that Orion had uncovered, proving that Mira had been using her law firm's client accounts to facilitate Jace's money laundering. Client funds had been temporarily borrowed to cover his trading positions, then replaced before anyone noticed. How much are we talking about? Over $2 million in the past year alone. If even one client had needed their money during the wrong week, the whole scheme would have collapsed. I studied the documents, my analytical mind working through the implications. This is enough to send them both to prison. It's enough to destroy them completely, but we need to be smart about how we present it. The evidence has to come to light naturally, through official channels, with our involvement completely hidden. How do we do that? Elara smiled, and for the first time, I saw genuine warmth in her expression. We let them destroy themselves. Your house is now completely monitored, thanks to Orion's work. We sit back and record everything they say and do. Eventually, they'll slip up and incriminate themselves beyond any reasonable doubt. And then? Then we hand everything over to the FBI, the State Bar Association, and the Securities and Exchange Commission simultaneously. By the time they realize what's happening, it'll be too late to cover their tracks. I finished my drink and considered the proposal. It was elegant, thorough, and completely legal. More importantly, it would give Mira and Jace exactly what they deserved. There's one condition, I said. I want to confront them personally before the authorities get involved. I want them to know that I was the one who brought them down. That's dangerous. If they suspect what we know, they won't. I'm just the boring, predictable husband, remember? They'll never see it coming. Elara nodded slowly. Actually, that might work in our favor. If you can get them to confess on camera, it would eliminate any possibility of them claiming innocence later. Then we're agreed? We're agreed. But Wilder, once we start this, there's no going back. Are you prepared to watch your marriage completely destroyed? I thought about Mira's voice on the recordings, casually discussing my mental incompetence. I thought about 8 years of marriage reduced to a financial transaction. I thought about the private investigator's photos and the psychiatric evaluation that was probably already scheduled. My marriage was destroyed the moment she decided I was expendable, I said. I'm just making sure she doesn't profit from it. We shook hands across the table, and I realized that I'd just committed to a course of action that would change everything. But for the first time in months, I felt like I was in control of my own destiny. The game was about to begin, and I intended to win. 3 days later, Mira announced she was bringing Jace over for dinner to discuss some legal matters. She said it with the casual tone she used when talking about grocery shopping, as if inviting her lover to our home was perfectly normal. That's fine, I replied, not looking up from the security manual I was reading. I'll make sure the house is ready for guests. What I actually did was activate every recording device Orion had installed, test the audio levels, and set up a backup system to ensure that nothing would be lost. If Mira and Jace wanted to conduct business in my home, I was going to make sure their conversation was properly documented. They arrived at 7, both dressed in expensive business attire that seemed calculated to emphasize the difference between their success and my modest lifestyle. Jace shook my hand with the firm grip of a man who'd practiced the gesture in front of a mirror. Wilder, good to see you again, he said. I hope you don't mind me borrowing your wife for some shop talk. The merger has created some complex legal situations. Not at all, I replied. Can I get you both something to drink? We settled in the living room with glasses of wine, and I played the role of the oblivious husband perfectly. I asked basic questions about their work, made small talk about the weather, and generally behaved like someone who had no idea what was really happening. Actually, Mira said after a few minutes, we should probably review those contracts in private. Wilder, would you mind giving us some space? Of course, I have some work to catch up on anyway. I retreated to my workshop, but not before activating the living room cameras from my phone. Within minutes, Orion was sending me live updates through our secure messaging system. They're reviewing financial documents, his first message read. Looks like transfer authorizations and offshore account information. I watched the live feed on my tablet, listening to their conversation through noise-canceling headphones. What I heard made my hands clench into fists. The psychiatric evaluation is scheduled for next week, Mira was saying. Dr. Harrison owes me a favor from the Brennan case, so the results are already predetermined. Once Wilder is declared incompetent, I'll have complete control over his assets. How long will the commitment last? Jace asked. Long enough to liquidate everything and transfer the funds offshore. By the time he's released, we'll be living in a country that doesn't have extradition treaties. What about his business? Sentinel Systems is worth at least $2 million. Already handled. I've been documenting his erratic behavior with his employees. Once I have power of attorney, I can sell the company to cover his medical expenses. I had to pause the recording and take several deep breaths. The casual way they discussed destroying my life was more chilling than any anger would have been. "You're brilliant," Jace said, and I could hear the admiration in his voice. I never would have thought of the psychiatric angle. It's cleaner than divorce, no messy asset division, no custody battles, and if anyone asks questions later, I'm just the devoted wife who tried to get her husband the help he needed. They spent the next hour going over details that made my stomach turn. Bank account numbers, transfer schedules, even discussion of which psychiatric facility would be most suitable for long-term commitment. They had planned every aspect of my destruction with the thoroughness of military strategists. But they had also just confessed to multiple felonies on high-definition video. Around 9 o'clock, their conversation shifted to more personal matters. I watched them move closer together on my couch and realized I was about to witness something I really didn't want to see. I switched off the live feed but kept the recording running. Evidence was evidence, regardless of how unpleasant it was to collect. My phone buzzed with a message from Orion. "Got everything we need. This is enough to bury them both." Another message from Elara. "FBI contact is standing by. Say the word and they'll be in custody by morning." I stared at the messages for a long time, considering my options. The smart thing would be to end this now, turn over the evidence, and let the justice system handle everything. But the smart thing wouldn't give me the personal satisfaction I craved. I typed back to both of them. "Not yet. I want to confront them first." Elara's response was immediate. "Too dangerous. If they suspect—" "They won't. Trust me." I waited until I heard the front door close and Jace's car pull away before returning to the living room. Mira was cleaning up the wine glasses, humming softly to herself. She looked relaxed and happy in a way I hadn't seen for months. "How did your meeting go?" I asked. "Very productive. We should have everything finalized within the week." "That's great. I'm glad your career is going so well." She smiled at me, actually smiled, and for a moment I remembered why I'd fallen in love with her 8 years ago. Then I remembered the conversation I'd just recorded, and the feeling passed. "I think I'll turn in early," she said. "It's been a long day." "Good idea. You should get your rest. Big week ahead." After she went upstairs, I sat in my living room and reviewed the evening's recordings. The video quality was perfect, the audio was crystal clear, and the evidence was absolutely damning. Mira and Jace had just handed me everything I needed to destroy them both. But destruction wasn't enough anymore. I wanted them to understand exactly how completely they had underestimated me. I wanted them to realize that their boring, predictable victim had been 3 steps ahead of them from the beginning. I wanted them to know that they had created their own worst enemy. I spent the rest of the night planning the perfect confrontation. It would be public enough to ensure witnesses, private enough to avoid immediate police intervention, and devastating enough to make them understand exactly what they had lost. By morning, I had a plan that would give me everything I wanted: justice, revenge, and the satisfaction of watching them realize how completely they had been outplayed. The game was entering its final phase, and I held all the winning cards. The Altair City Business Association's annual charity gala was the social event of the year. 500 of the city's most influential people gathered in the grand ballroom of the Meridian Hotel. Mira had been excited about attending for weeks, seeing it as an opportunity to network with potential clients and show off her success. She had no idea it would be the night her world collapsed. I'd spent 2 days preparing for this moment, working with Orion to set up a presentation that would expose everything. The hotel's audiovisual system was surprisingly easy to hack. Apparently, their IT security was about as robust as tissue paper. "Are you sure about this?" Elara asked, as we reviewed the plan one final time. We were sitting in Orion's van in the hotel parking lot, surrounded by monitors and electronic equipment that would have impressed NASA. "I'm sure," I replied, adjusting my tuxedo tie. "They want to destroy my reputation publicly? Let's see how they handle having their own dirty laundry aired in front of everyone they know." "The FBI is standing by," Orion added. "As soon as you give the signal, they'll move in to make arrests. But once you start this presentation, there's no stopping it." I looked at the hotel entrance, where well-dressed couples were streaming in for the evening's festivities. Somewhere in that crowd, Mira and Jace were probably congratulating themselves on how perfectly their plan was proceeding. "Let's give them a night they'll never forget," I said. The gala was in full swing when I arrived. The ballroom was decorated with elegant lighting and floral arrangements, and a jazz quartet provided background music for the cocktail hour. I spotted Mira immediately. She was wearing a red dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, and she was laughing at something Jace was whispering in her ear. They looked like the perfect power couple, successful and confident and completely untouchable. That image was about to change dramatically. I made my way through the crowd, greeting acquaintances and playing the role of the supportive husband. Several people commented on how proud I must be of Mira's recent promotion and her role in the upcoming merger. I smiled and agreed, knowing that their congratulations would seem ironic in about an hour. "Wilder!" Mira called out as she spotted me. "There you are. Come meet some of the partners from Davidson and Associates." She introduced me to a group of lawyers and investors, most of whom looked at me with the polite disinterest reserved for spouses of important people. I shook hands and made small talk, all while watching Jace hover possessively near my wife. "Your husband has quite a reputation in the security field," one of the partners was saying to Mira. "I understand his company designed our new surveillance system." "Yes," Mira replied with a tight smile. "Wilder is very thorough in his work." "Obsessively so," Jace added with a laugh. "Sometimes I think he sees conspiracies everywhere." "Actually," I said, "you'd be surprised how often those conspiracies turn out to be real." The conversation continued for a few more minutes before I excused myself, claiming I needed to check on something with the hotel's technical staff. In reality, I was heading to the audio-visual control room where Orion was waiting. "Everything's ready," he said as I entered. "The presentation is loaded, the sound system is tested, and I've disabled their ability to cut the feed remotely. Once you start this, it's going to run to completion." "How long until the FBI arrives?" 20 minutes after you give the signal. That should be enough time for everyone to understand what they're seeing before the arrests begin." I looked at the monitors showing the ballroom, where the evening's program was about to begin. The hotel manager was approaching the podium to introduce the keynote speaker, a prominent businessman who would talk about ethics in modern commerce. The irony was perfect. "Do it," I said. Orion's fingers flew across the keyboard, and suddenly the large screens around the ballroom switched from the hotel's logo to a title slide. "The Truth About Merger Ethics, a Case Study in Corporate Fraud." The murmur of confusion from the crowd was audible through the audio feed. I watched Mira's face on the monitor as she realized something was wrong, saw Jace grab her arm and start looking around for the source of the disruption. The first slide appeared. Bank records showing the pattern of illegal transfers between Jace's investment accounts and Mira's law firm. The amounts were clearly visible, along with dates that corresponded to major client transactions. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said into the microphone as I stepped onto the stage, "I apologize for the interruption, but I think you'll find this presentation quite educational." The crowd was buzzing now, some people pulling out phones to record while others tried to figure out what was happening. I could see Mira pushing through the crowd toward the stage, her face pale with shock. "My name is Wilder Sornel," I continued, "and I'm here to tell you about a conspiracy that's been operating right under your noses. A conspiracy involving securities fraud, money laundering, and the systematic theft of client funds." The next slide showed email exchanges between Mira and Jace, discussing their illegal activities in detail. The text was large enough for everyone in the room to read, and the implications were unmistakable. "Stop this!" Mira shouted from the crowd. "This is harassment. Security." "Actually," I replied, "this is evidence. Evidence of federal crimes that have been committed by two people you all know and trust." More slides followed. The psychiatric evaluation plan, the power of attorney scheme, even recordings of their conversations in my living room. Each revelation brought gasps from the audience and increasingly desperate protests from Mira and Jace. "These documents are fabricated," Jace yelled. "This man is clearly having some kind of breakdown." "That's an interesting defense," I said, "especially since we have video evidence of you discussing these crimes in detail." The final slide was a compilation of security camera footage from my house, showing Mira and Jace reviewing financial documents and discussing their plans. The audio was crystal clear, and their words were damning. "The psychiatric evaluation is scheduled for next week," Mira's voice echoed through the ballroom speakers. "Once Wilder is declared incompetent, I'll have complete control over his assets." The silence that followed was deafening. 500 people stared at the screens in shock, then slowly turned to look at Mira and Jace. The expressions on their faces ranged from disgust to anger to simple disbelief. "You see," I said into the microphone, "my wife and her business partner thought they were dealing with someone who was boring, predictable, and easy to manipulate. They forgot that boring people often pay very close attention to details." Mira was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks as she realized the magnitude of her exposure. Jace was frantically trying to call someone on his phone, probably a lawyer, but the damage was already done. "The FBI will be here shortly to make arrests," I continued. "But I wanted all of you to understand exactly what kind of people you've been doing business with. This is what happens when you underestimate the boring guy." I stepped down from the stage as the crowd erupted in chaos. People were shouting questions, taking photos, and generally trying to process what they'd just witnessed. Hotel security was attempting to restore order, but the damage was complete. Elara appeared at my side, smiling with satisfaction. "That was even better than I'd hoped," she said. "They'll never recover from this." "Good," I replied, watching as Mira collapsed into a chair, completely overwhelmed by the destruction of her carefully constructed image. "They earned every bit of it." The FBI agents arrived exactly on schedule, moving efficiently through the crowd to place Mira and Jace under arrest. The charges were read aloud in front of everyone: conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, securities violations, and attempted psychiatric commitment under false pretenses. As they were led away in handcuffs, Mira looked back at me with an expression of pure hatred. For just a moment, I felt a flicker of regret for what our marriage had become. Then I remembered her voice on the recordings, casually discussing my destruction, and the feeling passed. "So, what happens now?" Elara asked as we watched the police cars pull away. "Now they face the consequences of their choices," I said, "and I get to rebuild my life without looking over my shoulder." "Any regrets?" I considered the question as we walked toward the exit, leaving behind the chaos and confusion of the evening's revelations. Did I regret the destruction of my marriage? The public humiliation of people I'd once cared about? The transformation from victim to villain? "None whatsoever," I said finally. "They made their choice when they decided I was expendable. I just made sure they understood the price of that decision." Outside, Orion was waiting by his van, grinning from ear to ear. "Best revenge plot ever," he said. "You should consider a career change. This was way more fun than installing security systems." "I think I'll stick with what I know," I replied. "But thanks for the help." As I drove home alone, I reflected on how completely everything had changed in just a few weeks. I'd started as the betrayed husband, the boring guy who was easy to manipulate and discard. I was ending as something else entirely: someone who'd proven that underestimating people could be a fatal mistake. My house felt different when I walked in, cleaner somehow, as if removing the deception had purified the air itself. I poured myself a glass of my good bourbon and sat in my living room, surrounded by the security equipment that had made everything possible. Tomorrow there would be lawyers and depositions and probably media attention. Mira and Jace would face trial, conviction, and the complete destruction of everything they'd worked to build. Their co-conspirators would be investigated, their assets would be seized, and their reputations would be permanently destroyed. But tonight, I was simply a man who'd refused to be a victim, who'd turned the tables on people who thought they were smarter than everyone else. I'd given them exactly what they deserved, and I'd done it without breaking a single law. I raised my glass in a silent toast to the security cameras that were still recording, still watching, still protecting what was mine. The boring guy had won.